everyone. I'm really glad you're here. Tonight, I want to help you let go of the day and ease into rest. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, and it means a lot to be part of your nightly routine. So if you haven't already, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It truly helps. Now, settle in, close your eyes, and let's begin. Story 1. Katie's OnlyFans. This all happened a little while ago, back when I was still living with my parents and working part-time at a local Starbucks. I was stuck in that frustrating space between adolescence and adulthood, old enough to crave freedom, but still tethered by circumstance. Money was tight. My parents constantly dropped hints about me moving out, especially my dad, who had big plans to turn my room into a nursery for my baby brother, Charlie. The pressure at home made me spend more and more time away, lingering at work even after my shifts were over, sometimes wandering aimlessly just to avoid going back to the arguments. Then, one night, I wandered into a karaoke bar a few blocks from the cafe. I'd passed it many times before, never really noticing it, but that night, drawn by the music and the warm lights spilling onto the sidewalk, I walked in, and my life changed. That bar became my sanctuary. The place had a small stage where local talent would perform, and over time I became a familiar face. The staff knew me by name, and I even developed a soft friendship with a few of the regulars. But the real reason I kept coming back was a girl named Katie. She was stunning, long dark hair, eyes that seemed to hold secrets, and a voice that could quiet any room. Katie was a local singer who performed at the bar almost every night. She had this kind of old school charm mixed with a subtle edge. She was magnetic. Every time she took the stage, the crowd would hush like a church congregation. I'd watch her, mesmerized, not just by her voice but by the way she moved, like she belonged to another time. Eventually, I got brave enough to talk to her after one of her performances. We had small conversations, nothing deep, but enough for me to build up the courage to ask for her number one night. To my surprise, she took my phone, typed something in, and handed it back with a wink. I was in disbelief. Later that night, my excitement turned into confusion. Instead of her contact information, she had linked me to her OnlyFans page. At first I was disappointed, but curiosity got the better of me. I'd never used the platform before, but the idea of seeing more of Katie, the mysterious, distant Katie, was too tempting. I entered my credit card info and subscribed. The content was as alluring as I'd imagined, each photo and video adding to the mystique she seemed to carry on stage. It felt intimate, like I had access to a version of her that no one else could see. For weeks, I continued my ritual. Work, karaoke bar, Katie's profile. I hadn't seen her in person again, which felt odd since she used to perform so regularly. I figured she had decided to focus more on her online presence. Her page changed too. At first, the pictures were glamorous, dim lighting, sultry poses. But eventually the background shifted to a wooden cellar, dark and bare, the elegance replaced by something colder. All her previous posts had been wiped clean. Only a few remained, each more unsettling than the last. In all the new photos, Katie wore sunglasses, and her expression seemed vacant, not playful, not seductive, just absent. The shadows behind her suggested someone else was taking the photos. I couldn't see the person, but I could feel their presence. There was a heaviness in the way the light hit her face. I tried to ignore the bad feeling growing inside me, dismissing it as my imagination. But then I noticed something that broke the illusion. A new message appeared on her page, a locked video. The message read, "Tip $5 for a special message." My hand hovered over the mouse. I clicked. The video played slowly. Katie stood in the center of the frame, still wearing sunglasses. She didn't say anything at first. Then, from somewhere behind the camera, a man's voice growled, "Smile for the camera, you vermin." Her lips stretched into a smile, wide and unnatural, like she was being pulled by invisible strings. I paused the video, heart pounding. This wasn't performance. This wasn't consensual. Something was wrong. I sent another tip, requesting another video. This time I asked her to show the person behind the camera. A few minutes later, another locked video appeared. In it, Katie said, "He's not my friend. Don't ever say he's my friend. Because he's not. He's more than that to me. He's my everything." A man stepped into frame, partially visible now. He wrapped his arm around Katie's shoulders. She flinched. He chuckled. "That's my good girl," he said. My hands began to sweat. I recognized him. I couldn't place where from, but his face seemed familiar in a way that felt wrong, like déjà vu during a nightmare. He then turned to the camera and said, "You'd love to see Katie's beautiful eyes, wouldn't you? Let's make this your best $5 ever." In the next frame, he removed Katie's sunglasses. I'll never forget what I saw. Her eyes were gone. Empty sockets stared blankly into the lens. Katie didn't blink. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there, expressionless, as though her soul had already left her body. I slammed my laptop shut and stumbled away from the desk, nausea twisting in my stomach. I couldn't believe what I had just witnessed. My admiration had turned into guilt, my curiosity into horror. I had unknowingly funded her torment. I hadn't saved her. I had encouraged her captor by clicking, tipping, engaging. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't go to work the next day. I kept waiting for another video to appear, for a message from her, for anything. But her account disappeared. Just vanished. No trace of her page, no archived content, no username found. I thought about going to the police, but what would I say? That I subscribed to someone's OnlyFans and saw something horrifying? That I had no screenshots, no proof, just the memory of a girl smiling without eyes? I kept refreshing the site, hoping it had been a mistake, but deep down I knew it wasn't. Katie was gone. Whether she had been taken or had chosen silence, I didn't know. What I did know was that someone out there had her, and he was still watching, still recording, still hiding behind the screen. To this day, I still go back to that karaoke bar. I sit in the same corner booth. I stare at the empty stage and remember the way Katie used to sing, how her voice seemed to float above the noise. Sometimes, I think I hear her in the background of the songs that come through the jukebox, just a trace of her voice, woven into the static. I never saw her again. But I remember the caption under one of her last photos, "Falling for you, I can't keep away." And I wonder if it was meant as a cry for help, or a farewell. Story 2. The USB in the park. It happened a few years ago, during one of those aimless late night walks I often took to clear my mind. I had my dog with me, a husky mix with more energy than I could handle during the day. The park was quiet, blanketed in moonlight and silence, with only the occasional rustle of leaves to remind me I wasn't alone in the world. We walked familiar paths under the glow of dim lampposts, weaving through benches and trees that swayed gently in the breeze. At some point, I decided to sit on a bench to give my legs and my thoughts a break. But as I settled down, I immediately noticed something pressing against me. I reached beneath me and pulled out a small USB flash drive. It had no label, just black plastic and silence. At first, I figured someone had simply lost it. Maybe it slipped from their bag. Maybe it had been left accidentally by a student or someone passing through. I waited for a few minutes, glancing around, expecting someone to return for it, but the park remained empty, and no one came back. I considered leaving it at the park's lost and found, but it was late, and everything was closed. Curiosity tugged at me. There was something almost too perfect about the way it had been left, centered on the bench, easy to spot, impossible to miss. When I got home later that night, I did what any curious person might do. I plugged the USB into my computer, half expecting old photos, documents, or even someone's forgotten homework. Instead, I found only one file, just a single Excel spreadsheet labeled Little Black Book. I opened it cautiously. The sheet was filled with rows, names, addresses, and numbers. Each line bore the name of a person, followed by a home address and a large numerical figure. Some numbers were as low as $30,000. The list went on, row after row, maybe 40 or 50 names in total. Some entries were highlighted in red. The rest remained in black. At first, it didn't mean anything to me. I assumed maybe it was some strange financial record or client list. I scanned through the entries, each one written with precision and purpose. The red highlighted names stood out like warnings, drawing my eyes back again and again. I didn't know why those particular names were different. I only knew that they were. Then, Curiosity turned into discomfort. I started to search a few of the names and addresses online. The ones in black seemed to match real people, ordinary citizens with jobs, families, and lives. But then I searched the first name in red. And that's when the darkness began to reveal itself. The person was real. Yes, but they were dead. The article I found said the death had been suspicious, the case still open. I tried another name. Same result. Then another. And another. All of the red highlighted names were linked to unsolved deaths, each more bizarre than the last. Accidents, drownings, unexplained disappearances. The numbers beside their names began to make sense. They weren't arbitrary. They were prices. Contracts. It became horrifyingly clear what I was looking at. This wasn't a financial ledger. This was a hit list. Someone had been keeping track of people, of payments, of eliminations. The red meant completed. The black meant pending. And I had found it. Or maybe it had found me. I closed the file immediately, yanked the USB from my computer, and sat in silence, trying to process what this meant. I wanted to believe it was fake. A game. A twisted joke. But it felt too real, too specific. The data was too well organized. I wasn't supposed to have this. I was never meant to see it. I felt like I had opened a door I wasn't meant to touch. The following morning I went to the police. I handed them the USB, told them where I had found it, and recounted everything I had seen. They took it seriously, to their credit. But they didn't say much. They asked for my contact information and promised to follow up. Weeks passed, then months. No one ever called. I searched the news for updates, hoping to see an arrest, a bust, anything. But the world remained quiet, like the story had been swallowed whole, and so had whatever secrets it contained. I tried to forget. I tried to convince myself it was over, but that's when the dream started. I'd see a man in the park, standing still, watching. I'd wake in the middle of the night with the sound of phantom footsteps echoing in my ears. Sometimes I'd feel like someone was behind me when walking home. I changed my route. I stopped walking the dog at night. Eventually, I even moved apartments. But nothing truly made me feel safe again, because the truth is, I never learned who made the list, or why it was left there. Maybe someone was trying to escape that world and needed help exposing it. Maybe they were leaving a breadcrumb for someone like me, or maybe it had been dropped on purpose, to see what I would do. Sometimes I imagine a second list, one with my name on it, highlighted in black, waiting to be read. It's a silly thought, one I try not to give power to. But on quiet nights, when the streets are empty and the world feels a little too still, I remember the names, the numbers, the cold red highlights that marked the end of someone's story. I never saw that man in the park again, but in many ways he never left. He became a shadow in the corner of my vision, a question that never received an answer, a presence I carry with me. I no longer plug unknown USBs into my computer. I no longer sit on park benches alone at night, but most of all, I no longer believe in accidents. Because that night in that park someone left a message. It didn't have a voice, or a face or a name, but it knew what it was doing. It was a ledger of death, and I was its next witness. Story 3. The pigman in the video chat. It happened on a quiet Thursday evening, the kind of night that normally passes without consequence. I was home alone in the apartment I shared with my roommate Josh. He was usually out with his girlfriend, and that left me with the comfort of solitude. On this particular night, I was engaged in a video chat with 3 classmates, Eric, Craig, and Cindy, on Facebook Messenger. We'd just been assigned a group project by our professor, so this was our first time really talking. The initial conversation was light and productive. We brainstormed ideas and got to know one another. Laughter filled the air as we bonded over shared stress and deadlines. But as the night wore on, things slowly began to drift away from the mundane. That's when Eric sent a message that seemed innocent enough at first. "Hey guys, want to see something cool?" I remember typing something back like, "Getting an A on this project would be cool," to which he just replied with, "Sure man, but check this out," and then he dropped a photo into the group chat. Curious, I clicked to open it. What appeared on my screen was a disturbing image. A woman, grotesquely mutilated, with her arms and legs severed. The sight made my stomach churn. Cindy immediately typed, "What the hell, Eric? That's disgusting." Craig echoed her horror, asking, "Where did you even get that photo?" Eric responded in a tone that toned too casual for what he had just shared. "I got it from the dark web." I had heard rumors about the dark web growing up, the supposed hidden underworld of the internet where unspeakable things took place, but I never really understood what it was. I had no idea it could be so horrific. Eric then shared another image, nearly identical to the first, but this time it had a title, Doll Number 20. Alongside it was a description box listing acts of extreme torture that could be performed on the so-called doll before it was to be shipped to a buyer. The room grew silent, virtually and mentally. As we all stared at the screen in disbelief, the sense of dread settled in like a fog, thick and inescapable. Eric laughed awkwardly, trying to make light of it, but none of us were laughing. I felt an intense unease creeping in. The image looked too real to be some kind of twisted joke. Still, I clung to the hope that it was fake, that it had been doctored somehow. Maybe just a sick prank Eric had found online. Then something even more unsettling happened. A new participant appeared in our group video chat. None of us had invited anyone. Who is that?" Craig asked. "Eric, is this one of your friends?" Cindy followed. "If this is some dark web prank, I'm calling the cops," I added. Eric swore up and down that he didn't recognize the user. I moved my cursor to leave the chat, but the mouse wouldn't move. No matter how many times I clicked, it stayed frozen on the screen. Panic started to rise in my chest. Then the video feed for the unknown user flickered on, revealing a man wearing what looked like the skinned face of a pig. It wasn't some Halloween mask. It looked disturbingly real, like an actual pig's face had been sewn onto his own. He stared directly into the camera, unmoving, unblinking. "Can anyone else see this?" I asked in a low voice. Eric replied, "Yes, dude, I swear I don't know who that is." The man's presence sucked all the air out of the room. Then his voice rang out through our speakers, calm, deliberate, and deeply sinister. "Can you see me?" he said. "Say yes if you can hear me." My hands were trembling as I replied, "Yes, what do you want?" He leaned in closer to the camera, his voice turning softer. "You know that feeling you get when you're with someone for too long, how each day begins to drag? I just want something new, something vibrant. I need a new doll." "What do you say? Sound like a brilliant plan to you?" His words chilled me. They weren't just creepy, they were deeply deranged. Then, from somewhere off camera, I heard a muffled female voice. My heart stopped. The man slowly turned the webcam toward the source of the sound. What we saw next was beyond horrifying. A woman, limbless, bound and gagged with duct tape, lay on the floor with a heavy chain wrapped around her neck. She flailed desperately, a look of pure terror etched into what was left of her face. "Oh my God!" Craig whispered. "This can't be real." But it was real. We all felt it. The pig-masked man picked up an axe, an enormous, brutal tool designed not for threats but for execution. My voice broke into screams as I shouted, "Leave her alone. I'm calling the cops." But I couldn't stop watching. And in that final, grotesque moment before he lifted the axe, I realized something. The woman was the same one from the photo Eric had sent earlier. Doll number 20. Then the axe came down. Again and again. I fell out of my chair and vomited, unable to process the brutality. It didn't feel like a video anymore. It felt like we were right there in the room, witnesses to a nightmare we never consented to see. And then, just like that, the screen went black. Everything disappeared. The chat was gone. The screen was blank. It was as if nothing had ever happened. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it echo in my ears. I immediately typed into the group chat, "Please tell me you saw that. Please. Did anyone else see the pig man?" Cindy replied, "I saw him, but my chat froze." Craig followed. "Yeah, it crashed. That was messed up. Probably a hacker." I typed, "We need to report this. Now." But no one seemed ready to take action. Eric said, "Maybe we just put this behind us." At the time, I didn't know what the right move was. I was scared. More scared than I'd ever been in my life. So I agreed. "Yeah, Let's just forget this. I lied. Because forgetting wasn't an option. That image would haunt me forever. A year passed. I dropped out of school after the incident. The trauma had taken its toll on me. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus. I got a job at a retail store, hoping the routine might numb the memories. One day, I came home to find a plain envelope sitting in my mail slot. No return address, no markings. I opened it without thinking. Inside was a photograph. It was Cindy, our classmate. But she looked just like the woman from the photo. No arms, no legs. A number etched on the bottom in bold black ink. Doll number 21. I dropped the envelope and screamed. I don't know what happened to Eric or Craig. We never spoke again after that semester. It's like the experience fractured something between us. We each went our separate ways, pretending it never happened. But I know the truth. I know what we saw was real. And I know the pigman is still out there, somewhere, watching, waiting, looking for his next doll. Story 4. The Pineapple Compulsion. It started like most nights did, me lying in bed, drenched in sweat, heart pounding like a war drum against my ribcage, trying desperately to convince myself that what I was experiencing wasn't real. I was trapped in what felt like an alternate dimension, surrounded by white walls that stretched endlessly in every direction. The floor beneath my bed was smooth and sterile. The light above cast no shadows, and the bars around me were cold, unyielding. Hundreds of distorted figures hovered silently beyond the cage, their bodies twitching unnaturally, mouths stretched into grotesque shapes that didn't seem human. I could barely make out their faces, if you could even call them that. They looked like something straight out of a demonic painting, soulless, jerking with eerie synchronicity, as though I were nothing more than a specimen being studied in a cruel cosmic experiment. My voice cracked as I begged them to leave me alone. But the more I pleaded, the closer they came, closing in like a tide of nightmares. I closed my eyes, desperate for a release, and in that instant, everything faded. I awoke in my bed, back in the real world, or what I assumed was real. The sheets were soaked through, my breath shaky, my skin clammy. It was becoming harder to distinguish dream from reality. This had been happening more and more often. The hallucinations, the disjointed visions, the feeling that I was being watched even when alone. My psychiatrist had diagnosed me with paranoid schizophrenia and obsessive-compulsive disorder. The prescribed medications dulled the hallucinations and made the nightmares more tolerable. But the compulsion, the one I hated most, never went away. You see, I had an irrational, overwhelming aversion to pineapples. Yes, pineapples. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But to me they were monstrous. The jagged skin, the chaotic pattern, the spiky crown, it all felt offensive to my senses, like an insect trying to crawl into my brain. I couldn't touch them, couldn't smell them, couldn't even look at them without shivering. My sister Jenny never understood. Unlike my parents, who did their best to support me despite everything, Jenny thrived off my discomfort. She had always been cruel, but this became her obsession. I think she liked the power it gave her. I remember when I asked her to pick me up from school. She didn't text "I'm here" like a normal sibling would. No, she sent me the pineapple emoji, again and again, just to see how I'd react. Another time I invited my friend Stephen over to hang out. Jenny ordered us pizza. When the box arrived, I opened it to find pepperoni covered in pineapple chunks. She looked me dead in the eye and smirked. "Just tell your friend to eat the pineapples." Duh. I couldn't hide my rage. "You suck. I wish he never lived," I snapped. It was one of those moments where something inside me cracked, but not loudly enough to be noticed. Just a quiet fracture, deep beneath the surface. Time passed, but the tension only grew worse. Jenny loved tattoos. Her arms were covered in colourful ink. I didn't care about them, until the day she walked into my room holding a sheet of paper. She had that gleeful look she wore when she was about to push me to the edge. "Hey Jake," she said, "I have 2 surprises for you." I barely glanced up. "It'd be a surprise if you moved out," she giggled. "Don't be rude. I drew something for you." She held up a picture of SpongeBob hugging a pineapple. My jaw clenched. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I hissed. "That's not all," she continued, lowering the paper. My eyes locked onto the new tattoo on her chest, bright, detailed, unmistakable. A pineapple. I screamed at her to leave my room. She laughed as she closed the door behind her. The rage, the humiliation, the sense of betrayal, it boiled over, festering in my mind like rot. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned as the image of her new tattoo replayed in my head. My thoughts spiraled. Why would she do this? What kind of sister enjoys tormenting someone over something so personal? My temples pulsed with fury. At one point around 1 a.m., I heard her laughing through the thin walls. That voice, smug and echoing, was like nails on a chalkboard. Surprise, she whispered again and again. Whether it was real or imagined, I couldn't say. But it pushed me over the edge. I got up, my heart beating erratically, and quietly made my way to her room. As I approached, I saw a pineapple sitting on her bed, just sitting there waiting for me. Was it real? Was it another prank? I don't remember thinking clearly after that. I grabbed the nearest object, a pair of scissors from her nightstand, and without even pausing, began stabbing the pineapple, over and over and over. The juice splattered everywhere, mingling with the blood-red stains of my own anger. It was primal. It wasn't just a fruit. It was everything she had done to me. It was every insult, every prank, every time she made me feel like I didn't belong in my own home. I stabbed until my arms ached. Then, breathing hard, I dropped the scissors, wiped my hands, and muttered, "Good luck sleeping on top of this mess, loser." It felt like a victory, like I had reclaimed some part of myself. A twisted, shallow sense of relief washed over me. The next morning, sunlight pierced through my curtains. My mom knocked gently and said, "Jake, wake your sister. It's time for school." I rubbed my eyes and shuffled down the hall, still basking in the afterglow of that moment. But when I opened her door, my world collapsed. She wasn't breathing. She wasn't moving. She wasn't there. But someone was. Lying beneath the blood-soaked sheets wasn't a pineapple, it was Jenny. No, 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 no. I backed away, clutching my mouth in disbelief. I didn't remember seeing her there. I didn't know. I didn't mean to. Please let this be a dream. Please let it be a dream. I stumbled to my room, collapsed on the floor, and closed my eyes, repeating the words like a mantra. Please be a dream. Please be a dream. And just like that, I was back in the white room. The cage, the distorted figures, everything was the same, yet everything was different. This time the shadows had faces, men in orange jumpsuits. I blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of it. And then it hit me. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't a hallucination. This was real. The cage wasn't in my head, it was a jail cell. The shadows weren't creatures, they were inmates. The truth settled over me like a cold blanket. I had killed my sister. I had let my illness and rage consume me to the point of no return. And now I was here, alone, forgotten, and haunted by the memory of the girl I used to hate, and whom I would now never stop missing. I don't know what day it is anymore. The lights in this place never go out. Time is meaningless here. I spend my days trying to forget, but I never can. I see her face every time I close my eyes. That smile, that laugh, that damned pineapple tattoo. It mocks me from beyond the grave. Sometimes I wonder if I'm still in that white room, hallucinating in an endless loop. Other times I know better. The bars are real. The silence is deafening. The guilt is forever. And somewhere in my mind, I hear her voice whispering, "Surprise." Story 5. Lisa and the Train. It happened on a Saturday night, one of those unassuming evenings that gives no warning before unraveling everything you thought you understood about the people closest to you. I was in my bedroom, half watching television, while my girlfriend Lisa sat nearby on her laptop, working on an English assignment that was due the following Monday. My parents were out of town, so the house was ours for the weekend. It should have felt cozy, comforting even, but there was always an unusual tension between Lisa and the world around her. She was quiet, withdrawn, and held a strange fascination with death, spirits and things that lived in the shadows. I'd always known her to be a little different, with her all-black wardrobe, heavy eyeliner, and distant way of speaking. but I chalked it up to her being goth. Despite our differences, my light-hearted demeanor, her dark intrigue, we had been together for 4 months, and until that night, I thought I knew her well enough to feel safe beside her. I remember her being especially quiet that evening, more so than usual. The only light in the room came from the soft blue glow of her laptop screen. Occasionally she'd pause and stare into space, as though she was somewhere else entirely. I didn't press her on it. I figured she was tired or stressed. Eventually she closed the laptop and asked if we could step out onto the balcony for some air. It was a clear night. The sky painted with stars, the air just cool enough to sting a little. We stood side by side, saying nothing, until Lisa spoke. "It would be pretty cool if I could see Todd again," she said, almost like she was talking to herself. Her words hit me like a jolt. Todd, her ex-boyfriend, was someone I knew only by name. She'd mentioned him briefly when we first started dating. She told me he had passed away, but never explained how. Now, standing beside her, I realized I had never really understood just how deeply his absence had lingered in her. Trying not to sound accusatory, I responded, "If that's how you feel, maybe you should go find him." I was annoyed, yes, but more confused than anything. Her face didn't react immediately. Then she turned to me with a look I'd never seen before. Cold, empty, distant. It was as though something within her had shut down. I took a step back, feeling a strange wave of unease rise in my chest. She didn't say anything else. Instead, she turned and walked out of my apartment, her footsteps growing softer with each step down the stairs. I stood on the balcony and watched her get into her car. Without looking back, she drove off into the night. Still riding the wave of frustration, I called out after her, "Fine, have fun fishing on Tinder, loser." She didn't even flinch, just held up her middle finger as her car disappeared into the distance. I tried to shake it off and returned inside, hoping a little TV would drown the guilt creeping in. 5 minutes later, I was still in front of the screen, but my mind wasn't on the show. I kept glancing at the front door, expecting Lisa to walk back in. She didn't. I picked up my phone and texted her, "Please come back. I'm not trying to fight. I miss you. We have the whole house to ourselves." No reply. Another message. Still nothing. The anxiety started to settle in. I tried to convince myself she was just being stubborn, maybe driving around to blow off steam. That's when I noticed her laptop. She'd left it on the desk, the lid still open. Her English paper was up on the screen, the document titled, "Be with your loved ones even when they're dead." At first I assumed it was just a piece of creative writing. Lisa always liked strange topics. But the more I read, the more disturbed I became. The paper wasn't a story, it was a confession, or maybe a guide. It talked about Todd, about missing him, about finding closure, about visiting the spot where he died. She wrote that she had discovered a ritual online, a blog that promised a chance to reconnect with the dead. All you had to do was return to the place where the person had passed and recreate the death. I began to panic. My hands trembled as I picked up my phone and called her. She answered. Her voice was cold, emotionless. "What do you want?" she asked. I tried to keep calm. "Lisa, come back, please. Let's talk. I'm sorry about what I said." She was silent for a moment. Then she whispered, "There's no coming back from this, Jack." In the background, I could hear the unmistakable sound of a train approaching, its horn loud, its wheels clattering like thunder. My stomach dropped. I clutched the phone tighter. "Where are you?" I shouted. "Lisa, where are you?" Her reply came slowly, with finality. "Where I should have been all along." I ran out of the house in my socks, grabbed my keys, and drove like a maniac toward the nearest tracks. I didn't know if I was too late. Didn't know if this was even real. I just knew I had to try. The train's horn was louder now, clearer, as though it were everywhere and nowhere at once. I kept calling her name, pleading, begging, trying to stop whatever was about to happen. "Lisa, get out of there. I'm sorry. Please." My voice cracked under the weight of my desperation. The sound of the train grew to a roar, a monstrous mechanical scream that echoed through the air. And then, through the speaker, I heard her say it, not to me but to him. "See you again, Todd." And the line went dead. I pulled over at the station, frantic, lungs heaving. my eyes scanning every corner, but there was nothing. No Lisa. No trace. No evidence she had even been there. It was as though she had vanished into the wind. In the days that followed, I checked every hospital, every report, every corner of the internet. Nothing. She hadn't been admitted. She wasn't listed as missing. Her phone was never recovered. Her car wasn't found. It was like she had walked off the edge of the world and into another one. I started to believe in some twisted way that maybe the ritual had worked. Maybe she had really gone to see him, wherever he was. I still don't know what's worse. Believing she died in some senseless act of grief, or believing that she somehow crossed over to be with someone she lost. I tried telling myself she was just mentally unwell, that she'd had a breakdown and wandered into the unknown, but her words stayed with me. That paper, that ritual, the way she stared at me, as though she had already made peace with leaving this world behind. I see her sometimes, not in person but in dreams. She's always standing near the tracks. The train always approaches, and she never turns around, just walks forward, just disappears into the fog. They say some people live with ghosts, but me, I live with silence. No answers, no closure, just an open wound in the shape of a girl who wanted to see someone one last time. Sometimes, when I drive late at night, I take the road past the station. I park the car, sit on the hood, and listen. I wait. Not for Lisa, not for Todd, but for that train. Because part of me still hopes I'll hear her voice one more time, just once more before the rails go quiet. Story 6. The Creep with the Dolls. It began after a late night at my friend Jason's place. I had stayed much longer than I intended, and by the time I stepped out onto the street, it was close to 3 a.m. The city had a different face at that hour. Quieter, darker, eerily empty. I needed to catch the Blue Night bus home, the only bus line that ran this late. Jason didn't live in a nice part of town. In fact, his place was situated near the edge of the downtown district, where the lights flickered a bit dimmer and strangers on the sidewalk kept their hands buried deep in their coats. I was already regretting not calling an Uber instead. I found shelter at a nearby glass bus stop, a small haven from the discomfort of the streets. Flyers cluttered the walls, job postings, rooms for rent, tutoring services, all papered over one another like the fragmented stories of lives I'd never know. One particular flyer stood out. It was a photo of an older man flashing a peace sign with a big grin. The bold text read, "Easy $300 in one day, call me." Curiosity got the better of me. I leaned closer and read the fine print. It offered quick money for a simple 12-hour shift helping out with cleaning and light chores. No experience required. Just call the number. I took a photo of the flyer, half jokingly, half desperately. As a broke college student, the idea of making that much cash in a day felt like a blessing. My bus arrived, and I boarded still debating whether I'd actually follow through. I decided I wouldn't call so late, but I texted the number. "Hi. I'm interested in the job." Within seconds, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered hesitantly, and a man's voice crackled through the line. "Hey, you the kid from the flyer? You free now?" I stammered. "It's kind of late, can we do tomorrow?" He insisted, pleading. My wife and grandma are both sick. I could really use the help. I still hesitated until he offered double the pay, $600 for one night of work. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The address he gave me wasn't far, and I called an Uber to get there. As I stood on the front porch of the home, something about the place unsettled me. The windows were covered with thick curtains, and the lights glowed too dimly to offer comfort. Then my phone buzzed. "Can you see me?" the man asked. I replied, confused. "No, where are you?" He told me to look at the window. I did, but saw no one. "Look closer," he said. That's when I felt a hand grab my shoulder. I jumped. It was him. "Sorry," he chuckled. "Thought you could see my reflection." He introduced himself, then added, "My friends call me Creep." I blinked. "Why would they call you that?" He smiled wider. "It's a nickname from my mom. You can call me that too." I didn't laugh. My nerves were shot, but I followed him inside. The house was suffocating. Not because of its size, but because every inch was filled with dolls. Dolls on shelves, dolls in chairs, dolls stacked in corners with vacant eyes that seemed to follow you. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a shrine. I asked him casually, "Why so many dolls?" He replied with a strange fondness in his voice, "I collect them. They keep me company. Each one has its own story." He spoke like they were alive, like they were his family. So I asked, trying to shift the mood, "What exactly do you need help with?" He said his wife and grandmother were bedridden and needed care. His grandma had Parkinson's, and his wife had been in a car accident. She used to be a dancer, he said, eyes misting. Still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. He handed me a vacuum and instructed me to clean the halls. Just avoid the bedrooms so as not to disturb them. I began cleaning, but my mind wasn't on the floors. One of the bedroom doors was slightly ajar. I couldn't help but glance inside. On the bed, I saw a figure, a woman, still and silent, tucked beneath the blankets. Her face was serene, pale under the soft light. I assumed this was the wife. As I vacuumed the hallway, I noticed the man was in the other room, speaking to someone in hushed tones. That must be the grandmother's room. "Are you feeling better?" he whispered. Then his voice grew louder. "You should meet John. He's a very nice young man." Then he called out, "John, come meet Grandma." Hesitantly, I stepped into the doorway. On the bed lay what I first thought was a woman. But as I stepped closer, my stomach twisted. It wasn't a woman. It was a life-sized doll, dressed in a nightgown, posed to look human. I froze. "Where's your grandmother?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He frowned. "That is her. Don't be rude." I faked a smile and nodded. "Nice to meet you," I said softly, my pulse racing. "Grandma says you're very handsome," he replied with a grin. "She hopes you'll visit again." I backed out slowly, muttering something about the vacuum. He said he needed to grab McDonald's for his grandma and handed me an envelope. $600. Thanks for helping. Then he left. The moment he was gone, I dropped the vacuum. I didn't know if I was in danger, but every fiber of my body screamed that I needed to leave. Before heading out, I peeked into the other room, the one with his supposed wife. She was still there, unmoving, eyes closed. I whispered, "Mom, are you okay?" No response. On the nightstand were pills, enough to sedate anyone. She didn't move. I didn't wait any longer. I left the house and caught another Uber home. My hands were trembling as I remembered the envelope. At least I'd made it out with the money, I thought. But when I opened it, I found not cash, but 6 crudely drawn pieces of paper, each with a childish face sketched on it, and the words $100 scrawled across the top. It was a joke. A sick joke. Rage bubbled up inside me. I considered going back, confronting him. But something told me not to. Something told me this man was far more dangerous than he seemed. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. I knew it was him. Creep. I blocked the number. I tried to put it behind me. Weeks passed. I started to breathe a little easier. I told myself it was just a bizarre, isolated incident. Then, one day, I received a notification on Instagram. A new follower. The profile photo made my blood run cold. It was him. Creep. I tapped the page. Only one photo had been posted. In the image, he was lying on a bed, arm wrapped around his wife. She looked drugged, limp in his embrace. Around them were hundreds of dolls, all facing the camera with empty glass eyes. The caption read, "The best wedding and audience ever." I threw my phone across the room. I don't know what his endgame is. I don't know if he's watching me, or if he's already chosen someone else. But I do know this. Some people collect dolls. Others create them. And some, like him, make them from what they steal. Story 7. The USB on my doorstep. It was a quiet morning like any other when I stepped outside my small Canadian home, planning to make a quick grocery run. The breeze was crisp, the sky pale with the promise of a slow, uneventful day. But just as I pulled the door shut behind me, I noticed something underfoot. an object resting against the welcome mat. At first I thought it was just a piece of trash, something a passerby might have dropped. But when I bent down for a closer look, I realized it was a USB flash drive. Plain black, unmarked, with no label, no tag, just lying there, like it had fallen out of someone's pocket. It was easy to ignore it, and for a brief second, I considered tossing it. But curiosity got the better of me. I slipped it into my pocket and decided I'd take a look at it once I returned home. Later that afternoon, with the groceries unpacked and the kettle whistling, I sat down at my desk and plugged the flash drive into my laptop. A single folder appeared on the screen. It contained nothing but photos, dozens of them, all JPEG files, each marked only with a number. There were no names, no dates, just a string of silent images, waiting. I opened the first one, expecting vacation photos or maybe a collection of stock images someone had saved. The first few were tame enough. Photos of my town, the familiar skyline, well-known streets and intersections. It was clear the photographer knew the area. Then I clicked on image number 4. My blood turned cold. There I was, in the middle of a crowd on Main Street, walking without any awareness that I was being photographed. I leaned in. There was no doubt. That was me. At first I tried to rationalize it. It was a public street. After all, anyone could have taken that picture. Maybe it was just coincidence. But the 5th photo shattered that illusion. This time I was the sole subject, closer, clearer, walking alone with a coffee cup in hand, just outside the cafe I visited every Tuesday morning. I hadn't noticed anyone taking pictures that day, and yet there I was. A deep unease began to build as I clicked through more files. Each photo brought the unknown photographer closer, my face more visible, the angles more personal. These weren't random snapshots. They were calculated, stalked. Whoever took them had followed me, observed me from afar, with a focus that made my skin crawl. Then came the pictures of my home. The next image showed my house from across the street. The following one was even closer, taken through the living room window. My lights were on. I could be seen sitting on the couch, completely unaware. I recognized the shirt I wore. It had been just last night. That realization struck like a punch to the chest. Someone had been outside my home, last night, watching me, photographing me. I kept scrolling, hands trembling, breath shallow. Image after image showed me inside my own house, cooking, watching TV, standing by the window. Every photo taken from outside, always through a pane of glass. Because of the lighting, I had never seen them. I hadn't even thought to look. The realization that someone could see me, while I couldn't see them, it unsettled something primal inside me. Then came the next photo, and it changed everything. It was taken inside my hallway, not from outside, not through the windows. Inside. Someone had been inside my house. The next few images proved it. Photos of my kitchen with the lights off, my staircase, dimly lit by the moonlight filtering through the upstairs window, my bedroom door, slightly ajar. And then me, asleep, lying there in bed, my mouth slightly open, unaware, vulnerable. I stared at the image for what felt like hours. My body froze, as though wrapped in ice. Every instinct screamed danger, but there was no one to run from, no shadow to chase, just the sickening awareness that someone had crossed that final line. The last image on the drive was different. It wasn't a photo of me or my house. It was a close-up of a handwritten note, held in a trembling hand. On the paper, scrawled in uneven ink, were the words, "Never hide a spare key under your doormat." That single sentence made me feel more exposed than all the previous photos combined. They had been watching long enough to know where I kept my spare. They had entered without force. They had wandered freely through my life while I slept peacefully, completely unaware. The silence in the house suddenly felt oppressive. I threw it into a drawer and locked it. But that didn't make me feel safer. I changed the locks that night. I installed a security system, cameras, motion detectors, but the damage was already done. It wasn't just my home that had been violated. It was my sense of peace, my illusion of safety. I'd always thought that locks and doors and fences were enough, that you could keep the world out if you were careful. But someone had walked right through those illusions, as if they were made of air. I contacted the authorities, of course, showed them the photos, filed a report, but nothing ever came of it. No prints, no leads. The USB was generic, mass-produced, no serial number, no traceable metadata on the files, just images, hundreds of images. I eventually moved. New neighborhood, new locks, new life. But I never forgot. Every time I catch someone looking at me a little too long in public, I feel that old chill again. Every time I hear a creak in the hallway at night, I hold my breath, because someone was there, watching, walking through my world like a ghost in the night, and whoever they were, they never came back, or maybe they never left. Maybe they're just waiting for me to let my guard down again, but I never will. That single line still echoes in my mind. Never hide a spare key under your doormat. Whoever left that USB wanted me to know. They wanted me to feel exactly what I feel now. Watched, known, vulnerable. And it worked. Story 8. The Joker in the Pit. It started like any other Halloween night. A crisp, cool breeze swept through the neighborhood, the scent of fallen leaves and distant pumpkin spice in the air. I was about 13 at the time, young enough to still enjoy trick or treating, but old enough to start craving a little independence. My friend Sam and I had spent the evening dressed in matching Batman masks. A last-minute costume idea, inspired by the Dark Knight movie we had both loved. We had picked the masks up from a cheap vendor stand outside the movie theater during its premiere. They weren't great quality, but to us they were perfect. That year Halloween had started off with excitement, laughter, and the thrill of candy-filled pillowcases. We ran from house to house, trying to beat our own records. But as the night dragged on, fewer homes had their porch lights on, and the streets began to empty. Disappointed but still wired from sugar and adrenaline, we debated whether to head home. Sam decided to cut through the pit, a nickname for the nearby forested nature reserve that split the neighborhood in two. During the day, the pit was harmless. People jogged there. Kids explored the trails, but at night it transformed into something darker, something silent and vast. I was nervous about going through it alone, but Sam was already halfway in, so I told him I'd meet him on the other side. I figured I'd hit a couple more houses and then head home through the same shortcut. Mistake number 1. The remaining houses yielded nothing. All their lights were off, and the streets now felt too empty. I sighed, turned around, and began making my way toward the pit, dragging my half-filled sack of candy behind me. The entrance to the path looked darker than I remembered. My phone light was barely strong enough to illuminate more than a few steps ahead. I told myself I was being silly. It was just a shortcut. I'd walked it in daylight plenty of times, but something about that night felt off. The air seemed thicker. Each footstep felt louder than the last. The further I walked, the less I could see. The trail was muddy, uneven, and the wind barely rustled the trees. That's when I heard it, the soft sound of laughter, but not joyful laughter. It was off-kilter, unhinged, the kind of laugh that doesn't come from amusement, but from madness. I stopped in my tracks. "Hello?" I called out, though I regretted it the moment the word left my lips. I scanned the shadows, heart pounding, trying to dismiss it as some kid playing a prank. Then the laughter came again, closer, clearer. My chest tightened. That's when I saw him. A man stood a few feet ahead, just beyond the reach of my flashlight. He was wearing a Joker costume, not a party store version, but one that mimicked Heath Ledger's portrayal from the movie. The makeup was smeared across his face, blood red across his mouth in a grin that stretched too wide. His eyes were hollow, expression unreadable. He just stood there, silent, staring at me. I forced a weak smile. "Cool costume," I said, trying to sound casual. He didn't move, didn't blink, just kept grinning. Then, slowly, he began to walk toward me. His footsteps were slow, deliberate. I backed up instinctively. "Hey man, I don't want any trouble," I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Happy Halloween, all right?" No response. He kept moving. Closer. I turned and ran. My legs felt like jelly as I sprinted through the dark forest path, dodging low branches and leaping over roots. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The path blurred under my feet as my breath caught in my throat. When I finally reached the other side of the pit, I didn't stop running until I reached my front door. I slammed it behind me, gasping for air, trying to convince myself it had just been a Halloween prank gone too far. Still rattled, I went to my room and tried to lose myself in the mindless comfort of YouTube videos, but the laughter still echoed in my ears. That terrifying grin still burned in my memory. Then my dad called up from downstairs. "Mark, phone's for you." I picked it up, confused. "Hello?" It was Sam's mum. Her voice was trembling. "Mark, is Sam still with you?" My stomach sank. "No," I said. "He left the pit before I did. I thought he went home." The silence on the line lasted only a moment, but it felt like an hour. Then she said the words that hit me like a slap. "He never came home." What followed was chaos. Police, search dogs, neighbors forming search parties. Everyone combed the pit, calling out Sam's name, scouring the undergrowth for any sign of him. Hours passed, then days. And then they found him, or what was left of him. His body was deep in the pit, mutilated beyond recognition. His face had been carved into a grotesque smile. The skin peeled and stretched grotesquely at the corners of his mouth. His head had been severed. The horror was beyond words. I told the police everything I saw. The man in the Joker costume, the laughter, the chase. They listened, took notes, but I could tell they didn't really believe me. They thought I had imagined it. That fear had twisted an ordinary encounter into something monstrous. Weeks passed. Halloween decorations came down. The leaves withered, but nothing felt normal again. I didn't go trick or treating the following year. I didn't watch The Dark Knight again. Every shadow became a threat, every laugh a trigger. Then the news reported a witness sighting, a man matching my description, wearing a Joker costume, spotted near the park that night, 6 feet tall, Caucasian, purple suit, green vest, face painted in that same eerie style. But by the time they investigated, he was gone, like a ghost, like the Joker himself had stepped out of the screen and into our world, just for one night. To this day, I carry the guilt. If I had stayed with Sam, if we'd left together, would he still be alive? I replay those moments over and over in my head, searching for a different choice, a different outcome. But I always come back to the same place, the pit, the laughter, the man in the purple suit. I don't know where he is now. I don't know if he's waiting for the next Halloween to strike again. But I do know this. Monsters don't always wear fangs or crawl out of the shadows. Sometimes they smile. Sometimes they wear makeup. And sometimes they wait in the dark with a laugh that never dies. Story 9. The Elevator in Seoul. This story happened to my mum's friend in Seoul, South Korea, about 10 years ago. And even now, each time I hear it, I feel that same unsettling chill. My mother's friend was a young mother at the time, living in a high-rise apartment complex just outside the city's busy core. Her life was quiet, focused mostly on caring for her little daughter, while her husband worked long hours downtown. The apartment was in a relatively safe area, with schools nearby and other families living on the same floor. But even in the safest neighborhoods, you never truly know who walks among you. It was a day like any other. She had been running errands with her daughter, buying groceries, paying bills, picking up a few things from the market. The sun had just begun to set when she returned home. As she approached the elevator with her daughter in hand, she noticed a man already standing inside. He wore a yellow raincoat and a cap that was pulled low over his eyes, making it hard to get a good look at his face. He stood awkwardly near the corner of the elevator, holding something tightly wrapped in newspaper. At first she thought nothing of it, just a stranger heading home on a rainy day. But there was something about him, something unspoken that made her feel tense. She couldn't see his eyes, but she could feel them. And more than that, she could feel a stillness around him, a discomfort that hung in the air like fog. She instinctively moved her daughter to her other side, placing herself between the stranger and the child. Then she pressed the button for a floor. It was the only floor lit. The man had not selected a destination. That was the moment when her unease began to turn to fear. He was going wherever she was going. Her mind raced with possibilities. She looked again at the item he held, newspaper, wrapped tightly, with edges darkened by moisture. The shape wasn't obvious, but it wasn't groceries. It wasn't mail. It wasn't normal. Her gut told her something was very wrong. Trying to remain calm, she pulled out her phone and pretended to make a call to her husband. "Hey, I'm in the elevator now. I'll be home in a second. Can you open the door for me?" Her voice was loud, forced, trembling just enough to make her hope he believed it. She wanted the man to think someone was waiting for her behind that door. Watching, listening. She continued the fake call until the elevator dinged and the doors slid open on her floor. The hallway felt longer than usual. She gripped her daughter's hand and walked quickly, her ears strained behind her as she heard the shuffle of footsteps he had gotten off too. He was following her. She didn't look back. Her focus was fixed on her door at the end of the hallway. With each step, her panic rose. She reached the door and began banging on it. "Honey, I'm home. Open the door," she shouted. Her heart pounded. She needed to sound real convincing. "I forgot my key. Come open up." The hallway behind her remained quiet. She risked a glance back. The man had stopped walking, hovering a few doors away, unmoving. Then, slowly he began to walk away, heading back toward the elevator. Her hands shook as she waited for the elevator's chime. When it came, and the doors slid shut again, she felt her lungs finally allow her to breathe. But the moment of relief was short-lived. Her daughter was now staring up at her, confused, asking, "Mum, why are you yelling at the door?" Only then did she remember. Her husband wasn't home. He was at work. The door was locked. She hadn't told him to expect her. She hadn't even brought her keys. She was truly alone, and the man had left not because someone was inside, but because he had believed someone was. Her daughter watched silently as she pulled out her keycard and began punching in the door code. In most Korean apartments, you enter by entering a numeric passcode on a keypad, but the problem was, those keypads made sound. And the moment the beeping started, it would be obvious no one was opening the door from inside. The keypad beeped once, twice. Her fingers fumbled as the numbers blurred from panic. She could hear the sound of quick footsteps. He was coming back. She could feel it in the air, like static just before lightning strikes. She stopped punching in numbers and did the only thing she could think to do. She picked up her daughter, held her tightly, and tried again. This time she got it right. The door unlocked with a click, just as his shadow appeared behind her. She threw her daughter inside and shoved the door shut with every ounce of strength she had. Just as she locked it, she saw the man's face inches from the peephole. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply froze, breathing so shallowly it barely counted as breath. Through the peephole, she saw him pause. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He simply stood there. For what felt like hours, he lingered in silence before finally walking back toward the elevator. She waited several more minutes before collapsing onto the floor, clutching her daughter tightly to her chest. They stayed like that for a long time, not speaking, just listening to the terrifying quiet that had returned. Eventually, she called the police and gave them every detail she could remember. His yellow raincoat, his cap, the way he held the newspaper-wrapped object. They searched the building, reviewed security footage, but the man was never identified. He had vanished into the city like a shadow into the night. Months passed. Life moved on, though not as it had before. The memory lingered, always waiting just beneath the surface. Then, one day she was watching the news and saw a familiar face. A man had been arrested, Yu Young Chul, a serial killer responsible for multiple gruesome murders throughout South Korea. And there he was, in that now infamous footage, being led away in a yellow raincoat and cap, head low, just like the man in her elevator. It sent a chill through her spine. The same man, the same clothing, the same eerie silence. She would never forget it. Her instincts had been right. She and her daughter had come terrifyingly close to becoming one of his victims. To this day, she credits her survival to that split-second decision to fake a call, to pretend someone was waiting, to act, not freeze. But what haunts her most is the thought of what would have happened had she fumbled the code just once more, if her hands had shaken a little more, if her daughter had cried and distracted her. The smallest misstep might have opened the door to something unthinkable. And while she was lucky, she never again rode that elevator without a second glance. Because in Seoul, in any city, in any building, you never really know who might step inside with you.